tomorrow. Can't stand your evil ways. Going home tomorrow. Can't stand your evil ways. When you're around me, I'm full of misery all day. I can't go on. I can't go on this way. I can't go on. I can't go on this way. You don't want my loving, so I'm going away to stay. Don't try to find me. Don't even call me on the phone. Don't try to find me. Don't even call me on the phone. I'm better off without you. So won't you leave for me alone? I'm going to the river, gonna go overboard and drown. I'm going to the river, gonna jump overboard and drown. Because the girl I love, she just have left this town. When she left me, I bowed my head and cried. When she left me, I bowed my head and cried. I never thought I would be the one to cry. Wah, 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 wah. Well, if you see my mama, tell her goodbye for me. If you see my mama, tell her goodbye for me. I'm tired of living in misery. You made me cry when you said goodbye. Ain't that a shame? My tears feel like rain. Ain't Well, part ain't that a shame? My tears feel like rain. Ain't that a shame? You're the one to blame. Oh well, goodbye. Although I'll cry, ain't that a shame? My tears feel like rain. Ain't that a shame? You're the one to blame. You made me cry when you said goodbye. Ain't that a shame? My tears feel like rain. Ain't that a shame? You're the one to blame. Oh well, goodbye. Although I'll cry, ain't that a shame? My tears feel like rain. Ain't that a shame? You're the one to blame. Little girl, don't you understand? I wanna be your lover, man, all by myself, all by myself. I don't want no one to love you, I wanna love you all by myself. You'll find, little girl, you know it too. Don't you know I'm in love with you, all by myself, all by myself. I don't want no one to love you, I wanna love you all by myself.
Hello. We're going to get started, and I have consulted with Dr. Alicia Bork, who says that we're sufficiently under the occupancy limit such that all vaccinated people can remove their masks. So, which is good because I am not used to this anymore. All right, well, thank you all so much for coming. I know there are a lot more people watching online as well, particularly when the thunder started to roll, and there are many folks who've left town already. I'm going to do what I do, which is to talk way too much, way into the weeds, and then get to questions, but I think I can anticipate a lot of the questions that I imagine that you would have. So this is just to start to process for a minute, to give the understatement of the year. This has been a really difficult year. And I know for so many of us, while we managed to, despite some temporary furloughs, hold on to our jobs here, I know a lot of your spouses and partners and family members lost jobs. I know that some of them were sick. Some people lost relatives and friends. It's been brutal beyond measure. And we're breathing now, literally, on our masks. I'm so desperate for you to rest this summer as much as you can, to take a minute. I also know that this summer some of you are having to work really hard to launch our new ERP systems, and the rest of us are beyond grateful to you for that. And we're still, especially for some of those staff working on that, leaning on you hard for that this summer for a really good cause. But I just want us to process for a minute what we achieved this year. You know, the strategic plan is called Courage and Creativity, and that just kind of sums it up. I mean, courage because some of our folks particularly really were on the front lines, being in the residence halls with our students. You know, it's a leap of faith and their ability and willingness to follow the rules and keep us safe, and that was intimidating for us. And creativity because, boy, did we have to do a whole lot of juggling to figure this out. And setting up public health systems, figuring out quarantine rooms in the residence hall, how to get students to be persuaded to actually follow the rules, how to engage students from a safe distance, laser tag, that was my favorite ideas, setting up a whole public health system, and then the backbreaking labor of just moving thousands of chairs as the facilities folks did, communicating constantly for that team, making sure that we had FAQs out the wazoo of answering all questions. The dispersal of federal funds to students, which was about the most joyful and painful work you can imagine. And then many, many, many conduct cases for mask violations and everything in between. So I'm not going to name anyone involved because I think every single one of you did an extraordinary amount, and I don't want to risk not naming anyone. But I think if you stop and realize what you achieved this year for our students, for our community, it is pretty extraordinary. As we start to recover, I know we're thinking, all of us, about what we might keep from all of this: outdoor concerts where our students perform, and then the many, many things we hope to never do again, right? Teaching while masked, for example, so many things. So let me jump in now with where we are now, which I know you're all wondering about. This is a time so full of hope, but also frustration because we still have a ways to climb, right? And I think that we are in this place of knowing we're doing better, but having such incredible unmet needs, particularly compensation for all of you, that we're not yet there where we need to be. So I'm gonna cut to the chase and tell you at the beginning where we're landing on compensation, and then spend lots of time explaining to you why and how we got there. So we have a great big incoming undergraduate class. We're doing well on graduate and law. I'll talk more about that. We lost some ground in retention, which cost us financially, along with losing students. And so we have, as a result, pretty decent growth, and I'll talk to you about how we're spending it. But we are able to next year restore 2% retirement contribution, and we're budgeting $500,000 to go towards wage increases, but first we're doing a comp and salary study to figure out where folks have, because of these years of wage stagnation, gotten the most behind, and we're going to focus that first tranche of money for those folks, right? And ultimately, as you'll hear me talk about, it doesn't matter the budget, how we spend compensation, what bucket it goes into, but for me, it's really important to address the people who often may have started here 10 years ago or longer, who are now making a lot less than the people coming in more frequently. So before we give the brand new people a raise, that we start to address that wage compression. So I also want to tell you that our projections for the next 2 years are for continued growth, not based on what we're going to do, but based on what we've already done and the growth that we expect from the programs we've already launched and the ways that we have succeeded. So using conservative estimates of that, our plan, if things go well, is that we would be able to go up another point for the next 2 years on retirement contribution, so a point each year, and that we can add a 2% raise pool in fiscal 23 and 24 going forward, right? So this is a long-term plan where this is just the beginning next year, and we keep going until we get where we need to be, where we have equalized wages, where we have decent retirement contribution, and where we're in a place where we have the kind of growth necessary to sustain normal raises going forward. So that is the goal. I wish that it were quicker, but it's a really steep hill to climb. And while I have so much good news to report about how the pandemic did not destroy our momentum, it still gave us a kick in the shins and slowed us down a little bit. The amazing news is that the pandemic didn't kill our momentum, and that we're continuing to do really well. And I think you've gotten a sense of our reputation locally and our reputation nationally and the kind of buzz about Loyola right now, and that is all putting us in a really good place at a really tricky moment in higher education. So on the hope front, talking about undergraduate applications, they have really continued to rise over the last 5 years, and that's a tribute to the admissions, financial aid, and marketing teams who are unbelievably great, that we continue to get more and more interest in Loyola. And then that's half the battle. The other battle is to yield those students, is to get them to come. And despite last year's increase in admissions, COVID hit us at just the wrong moment. We reel in that undergraduate class really kind of in April, a lot of it, because our students are deadline driven. And in April, there were 2 hot spots in this country, and they were New York and New Orleans, right? So it was a very bad moment for us during the shutdown. So we went down a little bit last year, but you see at the bottom the numbers of where the class actually landed in number terms. But we are up now. No one panic, because we'll have summer melt. But we actually hit a couple days ago 1,000 deposits that we have no, on a goal of 800. And by the way, lest you think there are any smoke and mirrors in that, that's with a better discount rate for us. So we went down a point. We'll see where we land. And with the average GPA basically the same. So we did not reduce our standards. We did not throw money at the situation and get even worse with that. This is just a function of higher demand really across every sector in Louisiana, nationally, across regions. It is a seriously rising tide, which is a sign of real progress. So we have now the delightful problem of dealing with a very big undergraduate incoming class. But remember, in the context of about 3,000 undergrads all told, having an extra, we'll probably land at 150 students, is something that we can handle, right? But we've looked at where the pressure points are. We'll prioritize first-year students in the res halls and have a little less housing for upper-class students, but we had less housing for them this year, too, because of the COVID emptiness, right? We're able to refill there. We've looked at pressure points of where we need to do a little bit more in student affairs, in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and most of all in the teaching of classes that really need to be taken in the first year. So the deans have worked hard to help us hire more adjuncts and to be ready for those additional students. I want to tell you, too, that we are rethinking, because we had no choice last year, but orientation and Wolfpack Welcome, trying to put a lot of the logistical stuff that you have to tell the kids at the beginning but they'll never remember online, where they can watch it again later when they need it, and to do more of open houses and come and see and meet people and engage with the campus and really thinking about who we want to be. So if Student Affairs in organizing this reaches out to ask for your help with that, I hope your answer will always be yes. And I'll send out an email, but we really need to be present for that orientation in the week before classes start. So let's talk about, and then College of Law. Their applications go up, but they have to work ever harder to bring in a class. If these numbers went back farther, you'd realize how much this class that's hovering around 200 is a real increase from years before, and they've managed to sustain that now, where we will have 3 larger classes in the law school. And I heard from the deans this morning, our graduate programs in business, in arts and sciences, in nursing, and music and media are all doing really well too. Some of them are up significantly. And that ability to constantly sort of look where something we're already really good at, we can often add a master's program to it without a huge amount more expense. We can bring in more students. That's what's going to give us the resources we need to continue to grow. So the diversity of the incoming class remains extraordinary. We have regained what we lost last year because of COVID and the economic pressures our students faced. We had a dip in Pell students, and we've regained that in spades. And we had a dip particularly in African American students last year, and we've regained that in spades. So we are basically undergraduate population, and the law school is also very diverse, that is representative of the demographics of this generation, which is to say majority students of color, people of color, and across the gamut in terms of economics. And that is a big part of our draw. That is the excitement for us in teaching these students and for them in coming here. We have taken a bit of a hit in retention, and from the anecdotal data we have now, and we're not done with this, right? So we're at about 80% right now with first-year retention, which is where we lose the most students. But this is a slightly dated slide, so we're up to 80% already on that green line, which is this year. But you see the behavior of previous years. Sometimes things peak and go down. Sometimes, as with the yellow 20 line, they continue to go up. We have lots of anecdotal data that we're not done yet, that students are just not rushing to register for courses, that they're exhausted and that they still will. But what we see that's worrisome is this huge drop in sophomore to junior persistence. And there we do have anecdotal data that we are going to lose some of those students, that they had their first year at Loyola. Some of them, even though we were open, they chose to hang back at home and to do it all online, and decided to transfer to schools closer to home, or to transfer to fully online programs that have their majors, whereas our online program may not. So that is both a hit to the students. If they've gone elsewhere and they're happy, then bless them. The ones who kind of are not going to finish college as a result, that's a hit to mission, also a hit to our finances. So we will continue to try to do more there. I can tell you that thus far does not look like we've continued to erase the racial disparity in retention rates in the first year, which is pretty exciting, but we went back to having more of a disparity as to class and Pell. All right, this is also part of why our students struggled this year. So this was a survey done of students. Almost half of them, the top line is Loyola, lost their jobs, and they were struggling financially because they couldn't work outside the home, and many more of them had families with financial difficulties. We had a great effort between advancement and marketing and student financial services and financial aid to really raise money for the Student Hardship Fund. We got to almost $250,000, which was then very quickly passed through to students. We captured the stories of the students we were helping to help us raise more money. That went really well. And then just a reminder that 17% of them had someone close to them die of COVID, that this was very difficult for our students emotionally, financially, to be 19 and to not be able to be physically near your friends, to come to a new place as a first-year student and to not know how to make friends. All of that was really difficult, and I know you felt that, and part of your exhaustion is how hard many of you were killing yourself to be there for them. So we have some catching up to do in their mental health, in their academic performance, all sorts of things this year. But my hope is that the glory of being back to normal, of appreciating what something closer to normal looks like, will really help us. So, finances. The fiscal year 2021 budget, we will end with a balanced budget, and that is a miracle. That is because of congressional aid that came through. But we made the really hard decision last summer to live within our means when it came to long-term kind of hits, like that smaller incoming class, like normal increases in fixed expenses, things like that. But to persuade the board, which was very, very hard for a board that's been through the ringer and feels guilty about letting this happen before, to deficit spend for the truly temporary COVID expenses and loss in revenue, with the hope that Congress would come through, but even if it didn't, that it would not make sense for a true emergency like this to try to gouge more out of a budget that is already so lean. And what frankly would have left us with no other options really than pay cuts across the board, which would have just, I think, been the last straw. So we did that as a leap of faith, and thank goodness Congress came through. And so it is a much nicer story to tell the accreditors when they come back that we landed a balanced budget this year, although I'm sure they will be cutting slack across the board, but it's just a simpler explanation to give. And then for this coming year, it's very hard to compare apples to apples, right? Because there's less revenue in the current year because of COVID. And then there's more revenue because of congressional aid. So what we tried to do is to compare as best we can what is truly new revenue available to us. So that is revenue above what would have been a normal year, minus the normal increase in fixed expenses. So our insurance rates go up every year. Things like that we have no control over that have to be paid first. And what that leaves us to spend on new things, is the best way to say it, is about $5.8 million. Just so you have a sense of it, the new revenue from the large income class is about somewhere between $2.5 million in additional net tuition revenue. And I'll come back and talk about why that seems like it should be higher, but why it isn't. And so what that leaves us with is, we've gone through these hardship years at Loyola, and we balanced the budget 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, but by the skin of our teeth. And it sort of wasn't really balanced, right? It was balanced without the retirement contribution. It was balanced with cutbacks that left some functions just unsustainable, where we're just brutally leaning on people. And so we need the growth to really get to where we have to be. So how we spend that extra $5.8 million is difficult, because we have critical compensation needs. We also have just critical staffing needs, right? That some of you cannot continue to take on the work of 2 and 3 people, as you've been asked to do now for a while. And where we just have false economies. For lack of a position, we save that salary, but we lose so much else, right? And then we have the need to fuel more growth, because if we don't spend some money on the things that will generate revenue in the future, then we never will get bigger than where we are now. And we need to get bigger than where we are now to fund everything that we need. So where we've landed is roughly a third of each priority. So let me show you this pie chart. It'd be a bit confusing, because the dark blue is the return to normal operations spending. Right, so that's extra income, a lot of that COVID income, like residence halls being at 100% returning, that kind of, but also the return to operating expenses. There are a lot of ways we save money this year by not traveling, not going to any conferences, not having catering for any events or meetings, right? And so that just returned to normal spending. And we're continuing to watch operating expenses like a hawk, right? That is still a very lean level of spending. So that we just take aside, right? Because that's the COVID revenue returning, the COVID expense returning. But you see the rest. The 1.8 million on the top there is the, let me get it right, is that revenue generating positions. So those are places where those are investments in having more growth. Sometimes those pay for themselves the same year, that's super easy, but some of them will pay for themselves later. So those are more fundraising positions, for example, where the return on investment is usually 3 times what you pay the advancement staffer. Some of those are, we're launching some small new athletic teams because they will generate more students and help us sustain ourselves for the cost of a coach, for example. And other things that will basically help us grow. The yellow are employee wages and benefits. That is the extra compensation, and I've talked to you about where that's going. And then the light blue at the bottom is fixed increases and miscellaneous. Those are critical staffing needs where we're just at a breaking point. So I'll give you an example. We have done without a risk manager for 3 years to save money. This is not smart, right? So we've hired a risk manager who will take some of the load of figuring out public health planning off of Alicia Bork's shoulders, thank God, and help us think through all sorts of things. And then the peach is more the cost of bringing in that larger class. So hiring adjuncts, beefing up a little bit in our staffing. We're being very careful to spend as little as we can on that, but we can't support, as you'd be the first to tell me, and many of you have told me, we can't support an extra 150 first-year students if we don't have some extra help, some extra sections to meet their demands. So Actually, let me pause on this slide. Do you all have any questions about this? I have lots more to say, but see if that makes sense. Okay, we can come back to that. So I also want to tell you that we have, and by we, I mean Carol and her team, because I would no sooner know how to do this than the man on the moon, refinance the bond indebtedness. And that went out to the market last week. We had overwhelming demand for our bonds because people are actually very excited, and our Moody's and S&P credit ratings, they lifted the negative outlook for Loyola. So what has done has both decreased slightly the debt service we have to pay and freed up about $15 million that we can use for deferred maintenance. So all of those places where the carpet smells and the plumbing doesn't quite work in the residence halls, and I get to see pictures of it sent by parents, we finally get to tackle those things that we've been kicking the can down the road for a very long time. So incredibly excited about that, and it was an amazing achievement. We're also, and what I love about this stuff is the kind of things that people have delayed forever because they're really, really hard, and we're finally going to do them and get them done, and it's gonna make our lives so much easier. The new ERP system. So thank you so much to everyone involved in the huge effort of picking the right system and getting it right. The advice we got from other schools, and we asked for plenty of advice, was that you pick very carefully, you use an off-the-shelf product. You don't try to have them specify it for your school, because then it becomes unfixable. And that you then realize it's going to be much harder than it looks to train everybody and to do the transition. So we are in that place. God bless all of you who are part of that. And we're trying to keep a really close eye on where it's just, it has the potential to break people who have too much on their plate and how much it will cost them. So if you need to say uncle and you need help with that, please let us know. But when I first came here my first week, and my assistant showed me her 17-page cheat sheet of how to enter expenses in the FRS system, and the black screen with the green prompt and the F7 key, I almost had a heart attack. So I can't tell you how hard it's been to sometimes feel like we're flying blind with our access to data and finances, student information, all of that. So it will both up our game, but it's also going to eventually, not right away, make our lives so much easier. So, I want to talk too just about the general university budget, so you have a sense of what we spend our money on, right? So this is one way to talk about it. I'll go to functions next. But we spend most of our money on payroll and benefits, healthcare. We spend another 19%. G&A is basically sort of operating expenses, and we keep those really fairly lean, as you can attest. But the rest, almost all of it, those are kind of our fixed expenses. Those are the things we have less control over. So utilities, we can do more to be more sustainable, but it's harder for us to ratchet that in. Depreciation, we're required to budget. Insurance, things like that. I mean, I literally go meet with the insurance company. We're insured partly by Lloyd's, and I fly to London and beg them personally, right? We do what we can, but those are the more fixed costs. And then you see within this is expenses by function. So the circled parts, and I would really add the 10% auxiliary enterprises, because that's mostly residence life staff, all of that are direct service of students, right? Instructional cost, academic support, student services, grants to students, and then we have things like research, public service, I think is upward bound kind of activities. And so that institutional support is the overhead of the university. Some of that is administration salaries, but a lot of that are those insurance and utilities and those kinds of expenses. So that is where our money goes, is to serve our students. Now, some of you may ask, and I should have maybe waited to get this question, but I'm just going to jump into it. Why aren't we getting a huge rush of revenue from having so many more incoming undergraduates? And why can't we just sort of solve this problem of our discount rate? So one thing I want to do is to redirect us to less about discount rate than about net tuition revenue, right? Because our net tuition revenue, what we get per student on average, has been pretty flat over the years, even though our discount rate has gone up. And that's because our tuition has gone up too, right? And it's multiplying one and the other that gets you net tuition. So it is this crazy weird market that we live in. It's a good thing you don't buy anything else this way, where sticker price signals quality, right? You don't want to go to the too cheap discount school, has been how the market has responded. And discount rate is about how much we value you as a student. Some of it's need-based, a lot of it's merit-based, and so it's not what you spend, it's what you save, right? About the kids who brag about the size of their scholarship without talking about what they're actually paying for college. And so all of that psychological stuff goes on in a market that makes it very tricky to negotiate. We have effectively, for a while now, been fairly flat in the net tuition revenue we get per student. And that, I think, is because American incomes at the bottom and the middle have been fairly flat for a very long time. I mean, what this comes down to is, in many ways, what our students who we serve can afford to pay for college. And so for a lot of them that are local, TOPS plus Pell plus a little bit more will get them there. During COVID, that little bit more proved insurmountable. And so how we solve this is really tricky. I mean, there's this world where we just say, well, let's chase more of the wealthy students. Well, there are fewer and fewer of those, and they're getting richer and richer. But everyone's trying to do that, right? And frankly, that's not really who we are. Been there, done that. And so it's also not really possible for us. That's not the market that we're in, and that's not, if that's what you wanted to do, you might be elsewhere. But it's about finding a few different options, right? One is if we can better scale what we do. If we were to design a system from scratch that said, okay, we're going to get about where we are now, 14,000 net tuition revenue per undergraduate, how would we make a system of teaching those students, of supporting them, of giving them excellence in the most efficient way possible? And this is a subject for another day, and I don't want to get in trouble, but we are a campus full of small classrooms, right? We're not going to fundamentally change what we do, but there might be ways, instead of increasingly relying on part-time adjuncts, that we figure out how to scale a little bit of what we do to be more efficient with how we teach. And there's also, of course, diversifying our revenue, that we don't want to be so dependent on undergraduate revenue, particularly in a market that's gotten so tough. And so that's what you see us doing, growing more and more graduate programs, of finding ways to sustain ourselves. And this is a university that was founded or grew in this interesting model where we created a radio station and then a TV station, WWL, Worldwide Loyola, that for a while at the peak of local television generated half of the revenue of the university. I wish I had worked here then, right? But we sold it. It's a debate whether, it would not have produced that much revenue now, right? The heyday of local television, like music industry, like journalism, these are very disrupted markets that we're good at. But we put that instead in the endowment. Now, the endowment also produces revenue, and if you're investing it well and it's big enough, that's a pretty big rate of return. The problem is the endowment is also eminently rateable. And so when Loyola went through its downturn, and we have the instinct, which I understand, of, well, those are our savings, and we should, if we have to deficit spend and use our savings and get us through without painful cuts or to delay them as long as we can. The problem is if we hadn't done that over the last 10 years, conservatively, we'd be taking in about $7 million more a year in interest from that endowment to sustain our budget, right? That's what it cost us. It was like lopping off that golden goose a little bit at a time. And so the strategic plan that I presented to you all last year really focuses on growth. It's on that. So new graduate programs, which many of you are very busy launching and doing brilliant work. We're especially doing more in healthcare. We have our new Dean, Shelley Collins, who's knocking it out of the park with her team. And so new nursing programs, a new undergraduate nursing program, which is starting with, instead of the projected 30 students, about, 47 coming in, and then another dozen or more transfer students we didn't expect. We have a new, between nursing and health and the College of Business, Master's in Healthcare Administration. We have the new public health major in the undergraduate, which is one of the fastest growing majors that will help us attract students. We're bringing more, our idea is to bring more of the rent that students pay in this community onto campus by building another residence hall as part of our campus master plan. The first step to that was to get our credit rating up so that we can bond finance that, hopefully ourselves, instead of having to develop it with a partner. We're in the planning phase of the Broadway campus to see how we can bring more life and sustainability and revenue there. More on that, but I need to explain it to the neighbors at the same time I tell you. We're investing the endowment more effectively. We got real conservative for a while. Now we're doing well, and we've gotten the benefit of some of those big market gains this year. We struggled a bit to get the right vision for online, and we've had transitions there. And it is a crowded, disrupted market, right? It is not the panacea, but it's also the place where we need to be, or else we will be left out. So we had a search for director of online, and didn't get a candidate we thought was right for the job. So we are merging two positions, one of which hadn't been funded yet, but I've talked to you all before about resurrecting the concept of City College. So that used to be the old school version of a night school physically on campus where working people came to get their degrees. My dad taught there in the 80s. Now will be the modern version of that, of the place that houses sort of the brands of our online, of continuing education, of the ways that we are more entrepreneurial, and hopefully tap into the fact that we have tens of thousands of City College alums who might be very excited by this prospect of having the modern version of it. So we are doing a search led by Maria Calzada for a new dean of City College who will be the sort of director and visionary for online programming. Oh, I was supposed to be on that slide. I've been playing on PowerPoint, and I found stock images today, and I was very excited. Like, what does growth look like? I'm so excited to not talk about COVID pretty soon, but we're getting there. I first want to say that we are, as of this morning, faculty and staff are up to 78% vaccinated, which is amazing. And some of you, it's probably higher, but a few of you are just holding out on the survey. I don't know if you're just messing with us or you don't want to tell us, but we're going to hunt you down and ask that you tell us. If you're not getting vaccinated, please just tell us. We have about 3% of employees have told us that they don't intend to get vaccinated for a variety of reasons, right? And but we really want to know for the rest. But that is a great sign, and I think we're there, and we don't, we've gotten to where we need to be. With students, we sent out a message a few weeks ago. We pulled the trigger on a requirement of vaccines. Now, it has, by law, broad exceptions for health and religious exceptions. We added a deeply held philosophical reasons exceptions for a couple reasons. One is that I don't really want people lying and saying it's religion if it's not, and because we didn't want to have World War III with the pretty small percentage of people who feel very strongly about this and lose the ability to motivate students, the rest of whom are not philosophically opposed. They are driven only by procrastination and inertia, right? And so to give those students a deadline and to say, you either need to submit your vaccination paperwork as they have to do for other vaccines already, or you need to just fill out this form with a small essay, and you can upload any supporting documentation about why you don't want to do it, right? So I will tell you, we got, I think, 4 angry emails from parents, and that was it, knock on wood. So I think it's going well, right? So students are deadline driven, and we are not yet at the place we're kind of above. I'm trying to see. We have it broken down to the incoming class who just need to submit paperwork, returning undergraduates, many of whom were vaccinated while they were still here, graduate students, and then law is the off-white line. Okay. I will tell you that we will be doing whatever public health authorities tell us about the world of vaccines and non-vaccines in the fall. And right now, what we're hearing from public health authorities, so if anyone is worried about this isn't coming from us, but we of course must obey it, is that the unvaccinated do need to mask. We're going to be sending out a lot of messages, though, to our students, to our community, reminding them when they come back that there are vaccinated people choosing to mask, that there are people who are unvaccinated for very important health reasons that you don't know, and that we're not in the business of judging, and that we're all in this together. And the purpose of masking the unvaccinated is not to punish them, it's to keep them safe, right? That they don't spread it to each other. And so I hope that you'll all help me in creating that environment where we just take it easy on each other and where students don't get riled up about it. We are completing the leadership team. There's been a lot of transition since I took over for all sorts of reasons, but we have a new general counsel, Sharonda Williams, who many of you will know is our alum, and she was also on the board. She stepped down when she was being considered for this job, and she brings just a wealth of experience in employment law and contract law and the things that we're going to be bothering her for all the time, but also, by all accounts, is just an unflappable diplomatic presence who will be really good at helping us solve problems before they blow up. And she will be a fresh eye on all of our systems that we need to continue to make better, bias response systems, Title IX, and I'm excited for that and for her input. And then I talked about City College. We are also making progress slowly but surely on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're not doing huge amounts of faculty hiring, so it's hard to move the needle dramatically on that. But the hiring we have done, I'm still getting the numbers for the hiring from this year. But last year, we went from 22% faculty of color to 24%. It's a pretty good increase in a year when there's not a huge amount of turnover. And then the hiring, I know anecdotally from deans this year was also a really strong effort to increase our diversity. And that comes from our students. Well, first of all, we know that we don't have fully our best and brightest when we're missing people. We don't have a full sort of array of the broad perspectives and experiences that faculty bring to their teaching and their research. But also, when we tell our students every day they can do anything they set their minds and hearts to, we need to demonstrate that in who they see here in positions of power. So we're making progress on that. We are slowly but surely working our way through giving faculty a mandatory training in diversity, not just with a 2-hour box-checking exercise, but with full courses that are really thoughtful and help us teach and support students better, and continuing just to work our strategic plan on inclusive excellence. And then I'm almost done. We're sending out an email tomorrow about this, but the groundbreaking for the Benson Jesuit Center is Thursday morning with the Archbishop and the Provincial and Mrs. Benson. This gives you an idea of the design. We did not want to block all of those beautiful quads that opened up when they tore down the old library, for those who've been here a really long time. And so it is tucked away closer to Monroe Hall. And it is round, and thus the foot traffic can get around it more. But it will house Ignatius Chapel. It will house also some multi-purpose rooms that can be used for other campus functions, events, and I hope will be the most welcoming space on campus. We're also, it's a beautiful design by a pretty renowned architect, and we've raised money for fixtures and furnishings and all of that in art, so it'll be really impressive inside. And I want you to know, in this time of tighten belts and such, this is all money raised really before I got here, except for the furnishings, for this project from donors who care about this project. They're not sort of general Loyola donors. They were excited about the chapel in particular. And so this is not money coming from the budget, nor is it money that we could spend on anything else. But it's really important that we get it done so we have it, and so that we gain the trust of those donors who've been very patient. And I'm not going to read all of this, but our athletics team has really knocked it out of the park. That's a bad metaphor to use. Literally this year, so I just want to tell you that and thank all of our athletics coaches and staff. And then I need to brag about a few students. So Valeria Ali is, I believe, a business school student who had an idea for how to link to Spanish language news services in a way that would serve the local community and got a Google Innovation Grant. We have David Price, who you may have seen on Nightline with his idea for a safety pouch to help young men like him terrified of a police stop to put their papers in a place that's bright, clearly labeled, and to make it safer for them in a terrifying situation. We have Julia Ernst, who competed in the Music International Grand Prix in the young adult category, and at 19, she's 19, was one of, I think, the youngest person competing, and she came in second in the world. And Rose Wagner, these are her awards she has won for reporting from last year. So I just want to remind us of why we do what we do. So I will stop there. Happy Pride Month. Happy Juneteenth this weekend. And I hope that Monday is a day that we can rest and think about what matters to us. And let me stop and take your questions. Do you have online questions, Rachel, or are you gonna? It's the only advantage of talking as long as I do is maybe I anticipated all of your questions.
I do have one online question.
Okay.
And I think it might be a little specific, but it was about the diversity of the incoming honors cohort. We know that.
I don't know that data yet, and I'm looking for Jonathan Peterson, but I can tell you that we chose Jonathan Peterson from our philosophy faculty to direct honors because he had such specific and impressive plans to diversify the honor students. And so there's been a real effort made to do that because it was sort of embarrassingly not diverse before, which is a problem on all sorts of levels. So I will ask him to help me circle back with that data. Tom.
Should I come to here?
Yes, and that way the online people can hear you.
Where are we and what do we need to do to become a Hispanic serving institution?
So we're just digging into this data because there are different ways to count it, so I know it way more than. To qualify, you have to have 25% of all undergrads. We are, based on IPED's data, at 19%. If you were to remove the students who just don't answer, some of whom are Hispanic, we would be at 22%, but we're stuck with the IPED's data. So I've been using 22%, but just realized yesterday that I may have gotten that wrong. Our incoming class is 20% Hispanic. But we are going to really have to figure out our plan to get there, and some of that will be less about admission strategy because they're really doing well. You know, we have admissions tours in Spanish. We have financial aid counselors who are bilingual because, you know, negotiating financial aid in your first language is hard enough as the parents, not your second or third language. We do all of that really well. We have feeder high schools in Miami and Houston. We have long traditions. And we are the rare kind of school as Hispanic as we are in a state that is not particularly, not nearly as diverse with Hispanic citizens and people as Louisiana is. Because of our Catholic Jesuit tradition, Central American pipelines, all of that. What we are going to have to do, the rest of us though, I think is to reflect that more in our culture and how we welcome students on our campus, and that Nathan and his team have more of a story to tell about how welcoming a place this will be. And given, you know, it's also a way of doubling down on our Catholic identity because the future of the American Catholic Church right now is Latino. And so thinking about, we've had a task force working on that, but it's been a hard slog during the pandemic. But how do we do more of that better? Because we're sort of stagnating at that 20%, which is an extraordinary place to be. And then the reason for this, for all of you, is not to prioritize that above other diversity. It's that the funding for African American diversity goes to HBCUs, the federal funding. So we don't qualify for that, nor should we. But if we got to HSI status, the reason universities strive for it is that it can unlock federal funding. It can give you an advantage in your research grants to federal agencies. It matters to us in all sorts of ways. So it is a goal in the strategic plan, but I just had a reminder this week that we need to stop and really figure out all of the obstacles, that it's not just going to happen naturally. It will also take us several years, both to get to that 25%, but the process is opaque and lengthy and onerous by design.
We have another online question,
Yeah.
and that is, can you confirm that the salary equity study includes both faculty and staff?
Yes, the comp and salary study includes both faculty and staff, and we have lots of wage compression for both. It also, I should add, will include a look at race and gender and other kinds of disparities too. I think a lot of that is overlapping with the wage compression that already exists, right? We're not on a consistent system anyway, so that will contain within it disparities that correspond to issues like race and gender, but that we can do an awful lot of fixing those things in one fell swoop. So the bid process for the firms asking to be our consultant has ended. I think we're in the process now of picking a firm to do it, and then they really dig into the data. And the advantage of that is both an enormous lift that our staff would not nearly have the bandwidth to do, but also you want an objective outsider to look at the data so that you know that the conclusions are credible, they're comparing it to market data of what market salaries will be. And I think you'll find that, we'll uncover lots of disparities that need fixed. We'll also find out that some positions actually are paid at market, which may be disappointing to some of you, but also kind of a relief, right? I remember as a law professor constantly wondering if I was making the right amount. And, we'll go from there. And we will get their advice on how to start. Where do you start fixing those disparities? My experience is they often tell you, and this would be very Loyola, to start with the lowest paid employees, right? For whom that disparity represents food money and the ability to pay rent, and go from there. But we don't know yet. We'll find out then how big the price tag is to fix all of the disparities and how quickly we can really tackle it. I can also tell you, I'm looking at Chris, that fundraising has continued to go well. It's been tricky during COVID because we can't fly anywhere and ask people in person and look them in the eye, but we've gotten creative with Zoom and Zoom cocktails and whatever it takes, just cold calling people. But in a year when our fundraising goal is about $9 million for new gifts and contracts, and our fiscal year ends end of July, we're at $8 million. So we're doing well there. And we raise the annual fund amount that goes towards the budget every year, which is also crucial. Yes.
In a galaxy far, far away, long, long ago, I heard you say you were concerned about retaining male students.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with that at this point? Do we have figures on that? I'm sure, it's been chaos, of course.
Right. So the question for those of you online is about retention of male students, which is lower nationally. It has been lower at Loyola. I have not looked at the data for this year of the gender breakdown, but we really, Liz Rainey and Nate Strayed and these guys do a brilliant job of drilling into the retention data and seeing where lessons are learned. So for example, we discovered year before last, I think, that students who had not declared a major in their first year were much less likely to retain. Now that's chicken or egg, right? So maybe for the kind of student who doesn't declare a major, that's a sign of other things being causal and not just correlative, but it also might be one of the biggest predictors of retention is how strongly you connect to a faculty member and how quickly. Right? And so declaring a major means you've got someone starting to mentor you and get you on board. So we aimed more efforts at the undeclared major population, right? Special first-year seminars, other efforts to really pull them in and keep them on board. It's a whole, I have tried to drill into why there are fewer male students coming to college in general and what these issues are, and I find remarkably little written about it for any of the faculty interested in this in a research study. I think it's really a problem. all colleges, I think, we're now at a 56-44% gender disparity nationally. Loyola, are we at 66% female? Yes. And for undergrads. And it is, it's obviously thrilling to have women here at the table where we were denied for a very long time, but those missing male students and the ways that they're underperforming in high school and what happens to them in a job market that increasingly is a knowledge-based economy where those blue-collar jobs where they used to be able to make an absolute middle-class living and support a family are disappearing. So what happens to train those folks and give them lives of meaning going forward? All of that I very much worry about, but I don't see people talking about it or interested in it. So if we can solve it, that would be great. Any other questions?
We have one about how the other Jesuit schools are doing and whether there are any plans for partnerships.
The other Jesuit schools, we get admissions data, and without being specific, a few of them have struggled this year, but a lot of them are doing really well. They're up. And I was talking to someone today who works with a lot of different colleges across the market, and what he said in generally in admissions trends is that it really has become the cleaving of the haves and have-nots. So if you're above a certain line, admissions are way up this year, and below it they're tanking. And some of that may be the aspiration of all these schools going test optional. We went fully test blind, where we're not considering test, not just making you guess about whether we're considering test or whether it matters. And so I think a lot of students are upping their aspirations of where they apply, which is good for those students, I think, because a lot of what holds students back is their idea of what school they can get into, not the reality. But it means that for schools that are struggling, it's pretty bad. So I think we'll see that falling out in the market in higher ed has been predicted for a while of colleges and universities starting to close. I always look for partnership possibilities with other Jesuit schools. I think it will help as we start to meet in person again, the presidents. There's been a small group of particularly Midwestern Central Province schools that have been having some initial conversations about possibilities of leveraging shared services. I think we waited too long for what ideas would get all of the Jesuit schools in play, and some of them are a lot less interested than others. So we're going with the coalition of the willing. But it is tricky to figure out what really makes sense, right? Shared services save money if you're wasting a lot of money. We're not. We're so lean and frugal that it's not that. I think there's more to be done with online. I have a pet project I'd really love to get off the ground of saying to all Loyola students for the 4 Loyolas, which are so perfectly situated, Chicago, New Orleans, LA, and then Maryland near DC, that they could have a study abroad semester, at the other schools. So I need to make that happen. But we do, in so many ways that you experience, still support each other with the listservs, the sharing of ideas, all of that. And I know from all of you, the willingness of people at other schools to help whenever you call is pretty amazing. So we'll keep doing that and keep finding clever ways. I know some of you have asked about Spring Hill. We really kind of don't know, and it's also not something I should opine about. But we're praying hard that they make it. It's tough to be in Mobile, Alabama, right? I mean, one of our big advantages is being in New Orleans. Right? Okay, guys, thank you so much. It's so good to see you in person.